I'm Jamel Hill, and on the latest His and Hers podcast, Michael Smith and I give you what you've finally been waiting for. Other than an actual podcast, we break down HBO's Insecure.
What's up, First Take fam? Thank you for being with us on this hump day. You are halfway there. Starting January 3rd, guess what? First Take on a new channel. We're going from 2 to 1. We're moving to ESPN weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern. We will see you there. But right now, lots to get into. He's a mix of talent and technicals, but should the NBA be concerned about DeMarcus Cousins? Plus, Richard Sherman lashing out at a reporter and then apologizes. So is this situation over or just the beginning? And is LeBron James a top 5 all-time NBA player? We get into all of it. Well, hello there. It's Hump Day. Welcome into First Take on this Wednesday. Max Kellerman here. It's good to have you here in studio.
Well,
not just by both of you. It's nice to have your company as always. Stephen A. in NYC. How we feeling?
Good morning, y'all. How you doing? How's everything?
We're all good.
Everything's good. That'll get a lot worse for you when you lose these debates, but right now it's good.
No, well, then life is lovely because I don't recall ever losing a debate since July 25th. It really hasn't happened.
Memory.
Really hasn't happened. That's right.
You know what it's all about. It's all about Boogie Cousins. He was the story last night. Let's get into it. After being automatically ejected in the final minute of the Kings' win over the Trailblazers when he picked up a second technical foul after he appeared to spit or throw his mouth guard at the Portland bench. However, officials rescinded the tech after determining that he did not throw his mouthpiece, and he re-entered the game, finishing with a season-high 55 points. Here's reaction after the game.
It's ridiculous. It's obvious what's being done out here. It's on a nightly basis. I hope the world can see now what's really going on out here because it's getting ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.
But did it come out of your mouth accidentally? Is that what happened?
Yes, man. This is ridiculous, man. I know what their game scheme is every night. They're hyping up that big man over there. He thinks he's a stopper. It's not happening.
From my vantage point, I thought that he taunted our bench, and as he was taunting our bench, the mouthpiece flew out. The referee asked me if it was his mouthpiece. I said that it was. Then he asked me if he threw it, and I said no, he didn't, and that's why he came back. It came out as he was yelling at our bench. His mouthpiece flew out. Whether it was intentionally spitting it out or not, I don't know.
I can't tell you what he said, but and before I say this has zero to do with the referees. It has everything to do with him. He deserved to be out of the game for what he did. His antics are over the top. He's disrespectful. I don't know that he spit his mouthpiece at me, but his mouthpiece came out of his mouth when he was screaming and yelling at me, and it was right next to me.
All right, Boogie certainly delivering on the court, but obviously he remains to be a headline off the court as well. Stephen A., should the NBA be concerned about DeMarcus at this point?
Yes, they should. They should be concerned about him, and I don't say that with any pleasure. I genuinely like DeMarcus Cousins. I think he's the best big man in the game. He's averaging 29 and 10 over the last 3 or 4 years. This dude has averaged 22, 24, 26.9. He's averaging 29.3 points per game this year. He is the best big man in basketball. DeMarcus Cousins is a star big man. This dude can be a superstar, but he's got to get his head on straight. This is a guy that's incredibly temperamental, and he's got to find a way to reel himself in and get himself under control. He might be right in terms of that particular situation where he was talking and a mouthpiece came out of his mouth as opposed to him spitting out his mouthpiece. Even his opponent acknowledged that he was talking to him, and while he was talking smack and what have you, the mouthpiece came out of his mouth. He didn't say that DeMarcus Cousins spit it out of his mouth. The flip side to it is that there are a lot of instances where DeMarcus Cousins has found himself in trouble. Most recently, you're sitting there and you're literally threatening a reporter because he mentioned your brother in an article for all intent and purposes was relatively fact-based. Now, I'm one of those individuals, Max Kellerman, as a beat writer for more than a decade, as a journalist covering the NBA for more than 20 years. I'm very particular about mentioning people's family members and what have you. Those are things that you certainly don't do from an editorial and opinionated perspective unless it really, really warrants it. But if it has something to do with an incident in question and you're simply reporting the facts, then there's no reason for a player to get up in arms about it, and there's never an excuse for a player to go at a reporter the way that DeMarcus Cousins went at this particular reporter the way that he did, which is why he was fined $50,000, which is why he felt the need to apologize via a statement, because the Kings probably compelled him to do so. But I'll take y'all back to an incident from years ago. And Max, this is just, this is me reporting here. Let me tell you what happened. Years ago, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, I'm not sure exactly, DeMarcus Cousins was getting the better of Tim Duncan in a game against San Antonio. Sean Elliott is calling the game for the Spurs. DeMarcus Cousins starts screaming, Tim Duncan cannot guard me. He cannot mess with me. This is what he's saying about Tim Duncan now. Tim Duncan simply looked and glared in the direction of Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich glared back and proceeded to call Tim Duncan's number for a play 13 consecutive times.
And Popovich is the man.
That's right? Tim Duncan, Max, scored on like 11 of those possessions. Like, just owned them. This is when in younger part of DeMarcus Cousins' career. So Sean Elliott sits up there and says, you don't tug on Superman's cape. After the game, DeMarcus Cousins is waiting near midcourt for him. Wants Sean Elliott to come over. And he said, man, I heard that you said X, Y, and Z about me. Sean said, yeah, I just said you can't tug on Superman's cape. And then he proceeded to threaten Sean Elliott. This is what has happened. So the NBA knows this. The Kings know this. The Spurs know it. Everybody knows it. DeMarcus Cousins is a great young player. I think he's underpaid. I think he deserves more money. I think he's the best big man in the game. But there is no question. And by the way, the Washington Wizards should be doing everything they can to get him, because he would love to be in Washington with his former Kentucky teammate John Wall. They actually want to play together, and DeMarcus Cousins would love to be in D.C. He's hoping Ernie Grunfeld could pull that off. But in the end, Max, what it comes down to is this. None of this means anything if he doesn't reel himself in and get himself under control. He's not a bad guy. He talks a little bit at times. He's a bit temperamental. That feistiness makes him great. But in the end, it's also getting him in trouble, and he has to be careful. And somebody needs to say that. That's why I'm telling it, because I'm looking out for the brother. I hope that he does well. He's got to get himself reeled in.
Here's the good news about DeMarcus Cousins. I always ask this about a max contract player, and he's not that. He's to a very team-friendly deal. But eventually he will be a max contract player. When you use that percentage of your salary cap on a star player, you have to ask yourself the question, can he be the best player on a championship team? In DeMarcus Cousins' case, I believe the answer is yes. He is that good. There are lots of star max player contract type guys who I say, nope, not good enough. Really, really good, but not good enough. Boogie Cousins is that good. He is, you said, the best big man in the game. If you consider Anthony Davis something other than a big man, and yes, Boogie can get the better of him head-to-head, but overall I think Anthony Davis, when he's on the court, is better than DeMarcus Cousins. But barring that, other than that, yes, he is the best big man in the game. He's just an outstanding player. Here's the bad news. He can't be the alpha on the team, because he has a screw loose. He's a live wire. And in a way that has a detrimental effect on the team too often. He needs to be with another star player who is veteran, more veteran than he is, older and more experienced than he is, and still totally excellent. You know, Rondo seemed to have him in check a little bit, but Rondo at that stage in his career simply wasn't good enough anymore. Boogie Cousins has to be paired with an alpha who can rein him in, a guy he respects who's not going to tolerate that kind of behavior from Boogie. If that happens, a team can win a championship with that guy. He's that good, but I don't see another way. Maybe the right kind of coach can check his behavior and channel it in a more constructive way, but I think it has to be a player. I think it has to be someone out there on the floor with him.
Well, it's a couple of things I want to address here. First of all, in terms of being that dude, it's not because of his behavior. The biggest reason he can't be that dude is because of the way the game has changed. You got to remember, years ago it was man-to-man. There were no zone principles implemented. But since the zone principles have been implemented, the big man can't be the dominant force that it once was. And that's what you have. Is that, you know, you got stretch fours that obviously can make some noise. Boogie can do it. Boogie's special, just like Karl Anthony Towns is special, because they can step away from the basket and make noise. So I'm not saying they won't get their numbers, Max. I'm saying they can't be the alpha dog for your team because the way the game is presently constructed, with it being guard-oriented and perimeter-oriented, as a result, even though Boogie Cousins is big time, he can't be the dominant presence. Your franchise player itself can't be the big man because of the new rules that were implemented by the NBA in order to facilitate the influx of more European players.
I hear that,
because they want to globalize the brand.
I hear that. I think there are some players, for example, if Shaq were in his prime now, the rules don't favor him. They favor a different style of play. If Shaq was in his prime, he would still be immediately one of the 2 or 3 dominant forces, along with LeBron in the NBA. Boogie Cousins, in my view, is so good that in spite of the rules changes, he could still be the best player on a championship team if he could get the other stuff in check.
Yeah, what I mean by it is that he could be the best player on any team, but it's not going to win you a championship if that's
you need other stuff too.
Because
right.
Wait, you need other stuff. That's all I mean by that. Now let's get to the other parts that you were talking about, because when we look at his personality, him being a bit temperamental, I don't believe a great coach is going to do it. George Karl was a great coach. You know what Boogie Cousins did? When George Karl walked up to him, Boogie Cousins got up and walked away. Why? Because this brother, he's streetwise, he's got that temperament, and he's got a real aversion to you being two-faced and phony in any way. If you can't be real with him and straight up in every way, he has no regard for you, no respect for you. And not only that, he's averse to authority in some degree. Where he comes in and can get checked and humbled in a positive way is when he's on the court with somebody he's playing with who's at an elite level,
right,
but also somebody he trusts, which is why I mentioned Washington, because John Wall is big time. John Wall is a genuine good guy. He can ball, and more importantly, he can get in Boogie's face, and Boogie's not going to want to beat him up. You see what I'm saying?
And that's the problem. That's why
he has love for him. That matters.
That's why I brought up being on the court with an alpha that he respects may be the answer here, because otherwise, Boogie is just a bully. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want, and he's done it with teammates. He's done it with coaches. He's done it with management. He's done it with a reporter now, with the press. And when he apologizes for it, it doesn't seem to me to be genuine. It seems to me that he's jumping through the hoops he needs to jump through because there was universal criticism of him trying to silence or intimidate a member of the media. So I don't think it's good for him. I don't think in the long run he'd like to be a bully. I hope he wouldn't. And I don't think it's constructive in terms of ultimately what he accomplishes in his career.
We'll leave it there. We are staying with the association for our Twitter poll today. LeBron passes Moses Malone for 8th all-time on the NBA scoring list, which got us thinking, is LeBron a top 5 player all-time? Go on Twitter and vote. You don't want to miss that a little later in the show. And Boogie, not the only one who's gotten into it with the media. Let's get into Richard Sherman. Sherm has become increasingly annoyed during his news conference on Tuesday. One media member concentrated on Sherman's questioning of coach's play calling last Thursday. Jim Moore of 710 ESPN Seattle asked Sherman if he thought he had a better handle on calling plays than offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell. Take a listen.
What I don't quite understand is Darrell Bevell's calling plays that he thinks are going to work, and yet you feel like you maybe have a better handle of what should be called.
No, I just we had a prior experience, so we talked about it. But let me guess, you have a better play call. Let me guess, you have better experience. Then you should probably kind of, stop.
What you didn't hear is that as Sherman was walking back to the locker room, he said this to Moore. You don't want to go there. You do not. I'll ruin your career. You'll ruin my career, Moore asked. How are you going to do that? Sherman said, I'll make sure you don't get your media pass anymore. Is that right? Moore asked. Yes, Sherman said, walking away. Yes, it is. So later, Sherman took to Twitter to apologize. I appreciate the role the media plays, and they have a tough job. I let it get personal today. I regret that. Next one should be fun. Stephen A., was Sherman out of line?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. And in the interest of full disclosure, Richard Sherman and I spoke last night directly about it. He said that he kind of lost his way. He should not have done that. He apologized for it. But he wanted to emphasize that it wasn't him, trying to be disrespectful towards the media. It was him going at one particular reporter who he has experiences with, who he believes is more interested in sound bites than good journalism. I'm not here to critique in any way the professionalism of the journalists covering the Seattle Seahawks. I don't engage in that unless it's something that's flagrant and obvious. I was not there. I do not know. I'm just echoing Richard Sherman's sentiments in that regard. He felt like the guy was looking for a soundbite and was trying to antagonize him, as opposed to somebody that was interested in good journalism and asking good questions that would probe a good response, as opposed to, some soundbite or headline that can antagonize and exacerbate an already shaky situation. Having said all of that, it still doesn't excuse Richard Sherman. He recognizes that he was wrong, and he just said, hey, it's something that I can't allow to happen. I'm bigger than that. I'm better than that. It's not something that I should have done. I would like to also add that in the same breath that we say all of that, one of the reasons that we paired this in the same block as DeMarcus Cousins is because somebody would look to compare that to the DeMarcus Cousins situation. Both of them are smart. The difference is that DeMarcus Cousins appears to be more volatile. Richard Sherman appears to be more cerebral and is willing to dissect you intellectually and battle you in that regard, whereas DeMarcus Cousins comes across as if he caught you outside the arena, he would do something to you. That's why the DeMarcus Cousins situation has to be treated with an elevated level of concern in terms of monitoring his behavior and making sure that he's cool and he's operating on an up and up. In the case of Richard Sherman, this brother is as bright as they come. He's as smart as a whip. They're trying to win the Super Bowl championship. He had a moment where he lost his way, and that's what he wanted to make sure he conveyed to me and to the public.
Richard Sherman here is a completely different issue, I think, than DeMarcus Cousins. Richard Sherman is a Stanford-educated guy who is genuinely, it seems to me, apologetic for this situation, as opposed to someone who knows now, okay, I got to jump through these hoops to make this better. I think what happened with Richard Sherman is he gave into an impulse. He was angry. He gave into that anger, and it feels good in the moment. And afterward, maybe because he was caught, sure. Maybe had he not been caught, it wouldn't have mattered. But, he wouldn't have done this, or maybe he would have. But the point is, when confronted with this, he reconsidered his behavior. He realized it was impulsive and immature and irresponsible, and he holds himself to a good professional standard and therefore apologized for it. This is why Richard Sherman, in so many respects, is such an excellent example of the evolved modern athlete, and I'm a big fan.
You should be a big fan, but I wanted to piggyback off of something you said. Not that you said anything wrong there, Max. I just wanted to, just for the purposes of some of the audience out there, the kinds of folks that I communicate with on a daily basis. Let me tell you something right now. Yeah, Richard Sherman is from Stanford, and that definitely is worthy of being mentioned, considering the fact that he's from the streets of Compton. And also in the same breath, I don't give a damn where DeMarcus Cousins is from. You've got to monitor yourself and exercise control. You can't bring the streets to a professional environment. There's no place for that, and we need to say that. In terms of Ivy League, or not that Stanford, Stanford is Stanford, and DeMarcus went to Kentucky. Well, hell, you went to Columbia. I went to an HBCU known as Winston-Salem State University.
Explains why you lose all these debates.
Well, it doesn't. That actually, you got a lot more explaining to do than I do. You come from Columbia, which is an Ivy League school, and you getting your butt waxed by an HBCU alum every day.
I'm almost allowed to use half my brain on this show. I didn't tell you it's your contract. My brain is still behind my back.
What the problem is you're usually using too much of it instead of being simplistic. That's the whole deal. But here's the deal. In the end, in all seriousness, what it comes down to is that I just feel it's important that DeMarcus Cousins has a bright future, man. This dude can be a superstar in this league. I want this brother to succeed. But you can't act the way that he's been acting. He may have been wrong sometimes. Like he said, some of it's going on. It's ridiculous. But what DeMarcus Aldridge has to accept is the fact, DeMarcus Cousins has to accept is that he's brought some of that on himself. Because of his chirping, because of his talking. You've got the officials monitoring everything he does. He's done that.
I brought up Stanford and the fact that Richard Sherman went there and everything, but you're right. Let's leave education or pedigree out of this for a second. Even had DeMarcus Cousins gone to Stanford, there are some people you look at, I don't care where they're from, where they went to school, whether they're from the streets or not, whatever, you go, that's a live wire. There's something about their personality, they're live wires. DeMarcus Cousins is a live wire. I understand he values loyalty. I have had an interaction where he came on Sports Nation a year or two ago, whatever it was, 2 years ago, and I liked him. He was, I don't think he's a bad guy from what I could observe and interact with him, but he's a live wire, man. You see it. And he's got to get that under control, or someone does, and it's for his own good, because otherwise that level talent, which is rare, will be wasted.
I learn everything, every single day, over and over again. You have to prove it. That's the way that the NFL, that's the way that football works. A great example of this is Dak Prescott and what he's done. He's earned the right to be our quarterback.
That wasn't done for the cameras. That's the way he feels. The competitor in Tony, he'll shoot nickels with you for a line anytime you're ready. He'll do anything to compete. He loves to compete. And that's what made it so special for him to step up, and really for the team, but for everybody involved. He took the coaches off the hook. For whatever hook I'm on, he took me off. He took everybody, everybody, off the hook when he said, this is Dak's job. He's earned it.
Oh, Jerry, Jeff Saturday in the house. How we doing?
Fantastic. How you doing?
Good. Good to see you. You're going to be very excited about our next subject. I know you're fired up about this, but you just stay tuned for that. But first, we need to talk about Jerry with my man Stephen A. here. Stephen A., is Jerry right?
It depends on how you look at it. To me, it's embarrassing that he would say Tony Romo took him off the hook. You're the owner. You're the man that cuts the check. Not to mention the GM, the wannabe coach, the wannabe the president, and everything else in between. You're that dude. What the hell you mean he took you off the hook, or took Jason Garrett off the hook, or took Stephen Jones off the hook, for that matter? You mean that Dak Prescott going out there, balling out, en route to an 11-game winning streak with a QBR that was top 2 in the NFL, clearly in line for Rookie of the Year and mentioned in league MVP conversations? You mean that Tony Romo going up there acting like he was writing a retirement speech, for crying out loud, holding back tears? And by the way, I don't understand why it was a damn speech. Why did you have to read something? Look, I'm on the sidelines. I was hurt. He came in here. The way he's balling, there's really nothing to talk about. I love to play, but look, this is what he's doing. That would be that. But all the drama that comes with it, his epitaph that he was writing, made no damn sense for me. It was very, very melodramatic. And in the case of Jerry Jones getting back to him, I think it's utterly embarrassing that he would go on the air and say what he just said in terms of being let off the hook. Why the hell would you need to be let off the hook? Dak Prescott is flat out balling. You're winning games. You're a Super Bowl favorite for the first time in 2 decades. What do you mean being left off the hook? Maybe he's right. I don't know, but I think it was absolutely ridiculous for him to come out of his mouth and acknowledge such a thing, because it should not have required being let off the hook. You're in the production business. Dak Prescott is producing. That should have been that.
What hook? I agree. What hook? What hook is he on? What were they, like 8-1 at the time? Well, that's quite a hook to be on. Look, Jerry Jones has a quality about him that produces loyalty in others. You know, it elicits, that's how they respond, because he's obviously a loyal guy and feels the loyalty to Tony Romo. And so there are lots of good things you can say about Jerry Jones as an owner and the way he relates to his players. However, Jerry Jones also may have a narcissistic personality disorder. It always has to be all about him in every way. And in that sense, when the Cowboys succeed, they've succeeded either at times in spite of him, or because he's relinquished some control to Stephen Jones, who's made a lot of good decisions on personnel, right? Like they didn't draft Johnny Manziel. They went after the offensive lineman and all that. And I think Romo, if it's true as Stephen A., you say that he sees Romo as like his adopted son, then the reason he feels like on the hook is because he sees Romo as like an extension of himself. You know, it has to be about him. And so by Romo having the press conference, which I imagine Jerry Jones or someone probably picked up the phone and said, Tony, we need you to do this. And Tony, I'm sure, would reciprocate that loyalty because of how loyal Jerry Jones has been. He feels off the hook. He feels like his own ego is let off the hook when there was no hook in the first place. You were winning.
Well, I think one thing you have to look at for a Tony Romo situation,
was the Cowboys, their fan base, the way Jerry had talked about what they said before Dak ever, when Tony gets back, this is his team. And when you say things like that, that is your full intention, right? Most people say, hey, you don't lose a job because of injury, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that's not true, right? Guys get hurt, next guy comes in and plays well, it's his job. I mean, that's just the way the football world goes. But when you're talking about a quarterback, for the Dallas Cowboys, the relationship that you just referenced between Jerry, Jason Garrett, Stephen Jones, and Tony Romo, all of those guys, how they built this thing together, the way they were working towards, I'm sure he felt some tension of what he was going to do. I do think what Tony Romo did was good for their football team and their fan base by just walking in and assuring everybody what we all know, right? Because we don't have any vested interest. We're not Cowboy fans, haters, either way. We're just going to look at the field and say, hey, this is what should happen. But for people who live and die by Cowboys and, they're wearing the 9 jersey, the whole deal, when Romo goes up and says, listen, Dak Prescott has earned the right to do this, there is no question, because he knows it.
Wait a minute,
everybody knows it. And it's not going to be a distraction.
Yep.
That's the main issue. It's not should Romo be playing. It's can everybody else, every time Dak struggles a little bit, can everybody get off the Romo train and understand you have to let this quarterback continue to grow and develop, because he is a rookie. He's not playing like
Jeff,
a rookie.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, Jeff Saturday.
Yes, sir.
Why the damn speech? Why a speech? A written speech?
I'm with you on that. But I think Max made a good point. I'm sure Jerry or someone called and said, hey, listen, we would appreciate, you doing this. And I'm sure this was not Romo's idea. Hey, I'm going to come up and say, but what he did was heartfelt. I don't want to discredit this because I respect the way he said it. It's hard. I don't care what anybody says. Listen, you've been in this thing for a long time. You put everything you're in. You still believe you're a baller. To go up there and say, hey, this guy is better than me, that's a hard thing to say. And it's reality, but it is still hard. Take nothing away from that. But I don't think this was schemed from Tony Romo. I think he did the right thing. Stephen's question, though, I think that the point is it only became that level issue, right? And I always go back to Kurt Warner, who won his job because of injury, became probably the best player in football, at least the most celebrated MVP Super Bowl winner, and then lost his job to injury to a good but not great quarterback, Mark Bulger. Kurt Warner was probably still better than Mark Bulger, but they were 8-0, so he never got his job back, right? And that didn't become the issue that this became because the owner. Exactly. No, but it's not just Dallas. It's because, to Stephen's point, the owner kept pumping up Romo. You feel like if you took Jerry Jones out of it, it wouldn't have been the same kind of controversy. I agree with that, but to your point earlier, Jerry can't help himself. I mean, from the narcissistic point of view, he wants to be in the news. He wants to keep the Cowboys in the news, right? I mean, he understands business. This guy knows what he's doing. He wants to keep on the forefront of everybody's mind. So if he can cause issue without being a distraction for his team, it's a win-win.
And Romo's doing what he's asked, and I feel like he wrote it out so he could articulate himself the way he wanted to in case he got emotional, which he did a little bit.
Unbelievable. Y'all are unbelievable. I mean, why don't y'all just put on the cowboy pom-poms? You got to apologize everywhere. Come on.
Can we get into it?
You want to write Tony Romo's apology for?
Jeff just gave me a nice segue. Can we continue here, please? We have an NFC East showdown tomorrow night in the city of brotherly love when the 10-4 New York Football Giants hope to clinch a playoff berth with a win against the 5-9 Eagles, but it won't be easy. Eagles offensive tackle Lane Johnson will return from a PED suspension. Max, we know how you feel about offensive line and what they do for the football team. Jeff Saturday, we know how you feel, no bias. Is Lane's return a big deal for your Giants?
Yeah, I mean, the Giants are on upset alert right now. The Eagles always play them tough anyway. Like, I hate that matchup. I'd so much rather play Washington or Dallas than Philadelphia as a Giants fan. They just always play us tough. But us, I'm a Giants fan. Okay, fine. I make no apologies. In this case, though, with Lane Johnson, we have those numbers. Where are the numbers? Did we show those yet? Did we show the full screen?
Bring
them. Let's show them now. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, there's
look at this with Lane Johnson. Look at the difference. Points per game over a touchdown better. Look at the turnovers. The time of possession. Why is that? Because they ain't playing from behind with Lane Johnson. Why is that? Because he blocks and helps the running game. What does that do? Now you got play action. You got a passing game. Carson Wentz is much better. It sets everything up. And without Lane Johnson, yes, one offensive lineman, their best one, there was a tipping point. And they went from a team just good enough to be really good to a team without quite enough in the run game in particular to set up the pass and therefore not enough offense, and that negatively affected their defense, and they've been a different team. I hate the fact that he's coming back, and now they're playing the Giants, and the Giants are on short rest. I hate this game.
I love you. I mean, I'm just going to say, I'm putting pom-poms on for Max.
You're feeling like the quarterback right now.
I really am. I mean, he has made
like
Lane Johnson the argument for league MVP right now. Just right in this articulated league MVP for Lane Johnson. And listen, as much as I do love an offensive lineman getting some major pub, and he does deserve it, he's a good player, the reality is the reason Wentz and all those numbers changed dramatically dealt with defenses knowing who he was now. When you start fresh, people don't know what you're going to have. They didn't know Peterson. He hadn't called plays. They didn't know Wentz yet. No one kind of knew or got a feel yet. So as teams began to catch on, now, not having an offensive lineman that is productive, your run game going down, all those things do hurt you, but people just caught up to it. And let's be honest, the receivers for Philadelphia aren't scaring anybody. And then on top of that, they've dropped balls, haven't played well, their confidence is shaken. All of those things come in, and as good as your defense is, if you can't sustain drives and score points, it is what it is.
You're right. I hope you're right.
Let me say this, too, about Lane Johnson. It doesn't matter what position. Coming in after missing 10 games, it is difficult to get back up to game speed that fast. And the Giants' D-line is playing good. And so as you're watching this, make sure you understand, he's going to pick the game up really quickly. All of a sudden, guys start hitting that Jet 9 technique flying by. You got to get out of that stance really quick.
Let that be right. Let that be right.
Stephen A.
I don't have anything to add. What else is there to say?
MVP, Lane Johnson.
So you think the Giants are going to win?
No, the fact of the matter is that Max is hitting a panic button because of one offensive lineman. I think everybody knows that's utterly ridiculous. The only reason why Jeff Saturday did not say so is because he's a former offensive lineman himself who get no love. He obviously feels, he's sensitive to the fact that there's somebody on national television showing offensive linemen some love. I would remind Jeff Saturday that the Cowboys have religiously received love the world over. Everybody knows their offensive line is elite, so it's not like no offensive line gets love. The Raiders' offensive line has gotten love. The Cowboys' offensive line has gotten love. The Eagles got love last year with Lane Johnson in the lineup. This year, he's obviously out for 10 games due to the PED suspension. In the end, what it comes down to is simply this. The Eagles don't have receivers outside of Jordan Matthews, and Jordan Matthews is not really a number one. That's your problem. You combine that with a rookie quarterback, even though Ryan Matthews is averaging 4.5 yards a carry, and Darren Sproles is doing the same, they're not primary backs that you want to hand the ball to and say, take me to the promised land. And plus that, you got a rookie coach that at least Vegas, when you talk to the handicappers out there, because I interview them once a week on my radio show, Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio, the Stephen A. Smith Show. When you're sitting up there talking to them,
wait, what time is that on, Stephen A?
1 to 3 p.m. every weekday. Okay, but there are changes coming, which will be announced as we get into the new year. That's the bottom line.
I like that.
That's the bottom line. Hold on. That's the bottom line. In the end, what it comes down to is this. You look at them, rookie coach, rookie quarterback, okay, a number 2 wide receiver posing as a number 1. You don't really have much. That's the problem. Lane Johnson is an additional problem, but he ain't the MVP candidate that Max is trying to make him out to be.
I hope you're right.
Period.
Jeff, who you got winning this one?
I got Giants.
Yeah?
They're playing. Listen, I'm impressed with what they're doing. I mean, they are finding ways to win. It's not always pretty, but they are hanging in there. And we all know, we've seen this script before. Manning with a good defense coming late in the year, and all of a sudden he could potentially catch fire. I mean, it's a dangerous formula because they believe. They've seen it before. They believe. People buy into the. It is.
I see it. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, changing gears.
Okay.
Back to the Cowboys for a quick second.
Yeah.
You getting pumped about Tony Romo? We talked about Tony Romo, the adopted son.
Yeah.
We're all touched by him. The emotional letter, the epitaph, the speech that he wrote. Did you know that? I mean, you would think about him like he's a future Hall of Famer, right? Well, you know there's a Hall of Famer, a legitimate Hall of Famer, who would happen to be the greatest cornerback in the history of football, some would say, in prime time, Deion Sanders.
Yep.
Do you know that he's not? Do you know that he's not even in the Cowboys' Ring of Honor? Just a thought.
Deion?
He's not even in the Ring of Honor. He's not even in the Ring of Honor.
Deion's the second best player I've ever seen behind Lawrence Taylor.
Excuse me. I just text Prime because I said, wait a minute.
We talk about Romo here. Look at the jerk. What about Prime? Is he even in the ring of honor for the Dallas Cowboys? I just text Prime to ask him. He said, no, sir. That's all he said, no, sir.
They got another Super Bowl.
Prime Deion Sanders is not in the Cowboys. Prime time Deion Sanders is not in the Cowboys ring of honor, but we talk about Tony Romo like he rocked a star back. Man, go to commercial.
We'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, brother.
We appreciate you. Coming up next,
Please.
back to the association. Give me a Blake. The Clippers lose their big man for a while, so is this the beginning of the end of Blake in Los Angeles? These guys get into that topic next, and LeBron is flying up the NBA's all-time scoring list, but is he already in the discussion as a top 5 player of all time? Trust me, you do not want to miss Max and Stephen A. facing off on this one. Gonna be good.
I'm Mike Clay, and the latest fantasy forecast. Anita Marks and I break down Week 15 of the NFL season and tell you who you should be targeting on waivers this week. Subscribe to the podcast in the Listen tab of the ESPN app.
Bad news right now for Clippers fans, as Blake Griffin had arthroscopic surgery Tuesday on his knee. Griffin is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks while recovering. He's been having a solid year so far, averaging over 21 points per game. The good news for Clips fans is that the team actually played a little better without Griffin on the floor recently. They have a better win percentage, score more points, and have a better point differential. Max Kellerman, is this the beginning of the end for Blake Griffin and Lala?
Yep. He's been injured a lot recently. The team can function without him. He's not been posting up as much as he should have against the Warriors, for example, because I think he's trying to preserve himself physically. And it's a snake-bit organization, and for years it's because they had a lowlife as their owner. That's not the case anymore. Although they do have an owner now who managed to do a very bad job helming a very big corporation and was, was like the 11th guy in the garage when they came up with the idea, and so got extremely wealthy. Sorry, Steve Ballmer, it's just the way I view it. And the Clippers are, as an organization, for losers. They're a loser organization for losers. And what I mean by that is, if you move to L.A. and you are from Boston, you can't bring yourself to root for the Lakers because they're the enemy.
Okay.
But you like basketball, so you root for the Clippers because they're harmless and lovable. But they've never even been to a conference finals in the history of their franchise.
That is true.
And then you want credit for it too. It's the most annoying thing about Clippers fans. I spent 5.5 years in LA, and 7:10 a.m. in LA is ESPN is the home of the Lakers, and I noticed that Clippers fans, in addition to making the very bad choice of rooting for the Clippers, it's like moving to New York and deciding to be a Mets fan.
Is this a little bit about Marcellus?
Well, no, but he is a Clippers fan,
Yeah.
so that's a good point. Marcellus, what are you doing? He's just contrary. He always has to go against the grain. The point is, if you move to New York and you're a Mets fan, you become a Mets fan, you adopt that as your team, you're asking for it. Don't ask me to feel sorry for you. You have the greatest franchise in the history of American team sports, the Yankees. You opt to root for the Mets. You're asking to associate yourself with the loser franchise. What does that say about you? So all these Hollywood types and the people who move to L.A. and they root for the Clippers because they're the lovable underdogs. Well, what you really mean by that is they've been a losing franchise. They are for losers, and you choose to associate yourself with that. This is what happens. This is their greatest window of opportunity. The Lakers, Stephen A., have stunk so bad in the last bunch of years, like 3, 4, 5 years now. They've been terrible. This was the Clippers' opportunity. They had a great talent in Blake. They landed Chris Paul because the league, maybe illegally, undid the Chris Paul trade to the Lakers and then sent him to the Clippers, basically. I mean, more or less, that's what happened. And they had DeAndre Jordan, and they brought in Doc Rivers, who's a great coach. And the most they can muster is second-round exits and collapses. And now this. Blake the injuries are catching up. He's going to be a free agent. They got to move on. This isn't good enough. You're not going to win a championship like this. They were too stubborn. They tried to keep it together. Doc did too loyal for too long. And Clippers fans, you deserve it.
This is the beginning of the end for Blake Griffin, but primarily because he probably won't want to stay. I mean, the reality is that you're going to be hard-pressed to find people who are better for the Clippers over the long haul than a Blake Griffin. I think Carmelo Anthony would be better in a Clippers uniform than Blake Griffin, but because Blake Griffin is 27 years of age. I think his youth works for him, so they would be reluctant to do such a deal. But my point in saying all the things that I'm saying about Blake Griffin, here's where we really need to get to when we're talking about him. He's a star, but he's no superstar. He used to be box office. He's not quite box office anymore. DeAndre Jordan is far more of a Skywalker than Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin barely uses his post game. He's too busy shooting jumpers most of the time. And even when he dunks, he's not the Skywalker that he used to be, primarily due to injuries more so than anything else. Obviously, he's still a star. He can play. He can put up numbers. But here's the ultimate indictment. In the big moments, when you got to remember, you can play 82 games a year, Max. You're pretty familiar with the teams that you go up against within your conference come playoff time. So there are no surprises as the season wanes. At some point in time in a game of basketball, what separates the great ones from the really good ones or the good ones is the great ones, you can sit up there and say to them, here's the basketball. Take me there. No matter what. It doesn't matter that the competition knows what you're going to do. It doesn't even matter what plays you're going to run. I mean, Kevin McHale was on Mike and Mike the other day, Max, and he was talking about how Larry Bird played in the game. He wanted to go for the win. A 2-pointer would have tied the game. A 3 would have won it. And he walked over to the bench and he said to them, look, I'm about to hit this 3 on y'all from right here. Okay? And that's what he did. And that's what he did. When the great Julius Erving, the doctor and the house calls and class personified, literally punched Larry Bird in the face on the court. The only fight I've ever seen Julius Erving get into in his entire career. Why? Because Larry Bird said, I'm going to hit this jumper right here and did it. Oh, I'm going to go over here and do it to you again and did it. Are you seeing what I'm doing to you? Can you take this? No, you can't. Literally torturing him. What I'm saying to you is that Michael Jordan and others, you knew exactly what they were going to do, and there was nothing you could do about it. Period. Blake Griffin is not that kind of dude. Not to compare him to those guys, but I'm saying he's a guy that in big moments, you're still waiting for him to shine, despite him being the #1 overall pick in the draft 7 years ago. That's the reality. And so if you're the Clippers, with Chris Paul approaching free agency and possibly wanting out, stay tuned with that, Max. You heard what I just said. Chris Paul possibly wanting out of L.A. Stay tuned. Looking at that, looking at Blake Griffin, you've got to wonder what they're going to do and where they're going to go.
What does that tell you, Stephen A?
If Blake Griffin can't take you there, Blake Griffin's got to be able to take you there. Why bother?
What does that tell you? That means they should move him now and get what they can.
Wait a minute. Of course, you should move him before the trading deadline. But what I'm saying to you is that you got to make sure you can get equitable compensation. There are not too many athletic 6'10". No.
Otherwise, you're going to lose him for nothing.
Well, I'm just saying, when you consider the money you might have available and what you'll be able to go out and do, you got to take that into consideration as well. Because on a rare occasion, Max, remember, you can let a guy go and it clears up enough money with the elevation of the salary cap. You'll actually have more money as opposed to having to take back at least 85% of what you give away or something like that.
That's too much minutia to get into. Draft picks and expiring contracts. I'd take it if I were the Clips, but they're not a good organization. So
we heard you dropping a lot of L's earlier.
They're a better organization than you're giving them credit for.
Listen,
this is not the days of Donald Sterling.
That's true, but raise your kids Lakers fans. Let them be happy, people.
Okay.
Come on, what are you doing?
We got to leave it there.
Moved to L.A. I was a Knicks fan. I became a Lakers fan. That's the franchise. What's the matter with everyone?
All right. Meanwhile, earlier this month, LeBron James moved into 9th place on the list of all-time scorers, and last night he moved up the list again. In the Cavs' overtime win over the Bucks, LBJ passed Moses Malone for 8th all-time with 27,442 points. Next on the list for LeBron to catch, the Diesel, but it might take a while. Shaq has over 1,000 more career points than the King. So we posed this question to you all on Twitter earlier. Is LeBron James a top 5 player of all time? The results are in, and 72% say yes, he is. Stephen A., did our Twitter fam get it right?
You know what? I'm not sure. And a lot of people are going to, be up in arms about that because they're used to me being very, very definitive. I can't be definitive. This is the one question, Max, I can't be definitive with. Here's why. LeBron James, to me, is easily a top 5 player of all time for the first 46 minutes. The last 2, I'm not so sure. And that's where it comes in for me. Now, if you go by position, sure, he's top 5. Because I'm going to put Kobe behind MJ at the 2. I'm going to put Magic at the 1. I'm going to put LeBron ahead of Larry Bird. I'm going to put Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the middle, a 6-time champion, the league's all-time leading scorer. I'm going to put Tim Duncan as my top power forward of all time. But if you just shove aside positions and whatever, I give LeBron nothing but respect and deference because of his greatness over the course of time, what he does on both ends of the floor, what he does for 46 minutes a night. But when crunch time arrives, when palms get sweaty and backsides get tight, I can't put him there. I got to put Bird ahead of him. I got to put Jordan ahead of him. I'm damn sure going to put Kobe ahead of him. I'm going to put these guys ahead of him. That's the difference for me. And every time somebody asks me this question, I will openly admit, Max, I am completely incapable of shifting my position. I refuse to answer the question directly as it pertains to that because I don't ignore the last 2 minutes. I don't ignore overtime. I don't ignore crunch time.
Nor should you.
Pivotal moments. I can't do it. But I can look over the totality of a game, the totality of a season, and to tell you for 82 games a year, plus playoffs, plus finals, LeBron is easily top 5. But if I shove that aside and elevate the importance of crunch time, the last 2 minutes,
then he's
I'm
still
not gonna
top
lie
5.
to you.
Then he's still top 5.
Are you ready for this?
Go ahead.
I'd even put Dwayne Wade ahead of him in the last 2 minutes.
Okay, he's still top 5 that way. By the way, LeBron James choked away 4 consecutive fourth quarters in the finals against the Mavericks in 10-11, right? He did that. That ship has sailed. It's never coming back. It's one of the reasons he'll never be greater than Michael Jordan. However, to paint him with that brush as though he chokes under pressure ignores a lot of other fourth quarters, late and close, finals and playoff games and regular season games he's played in, where the statistics show that often, Stephen A., he's been more clutch than Kobe Bryant in those situations. But let's leave that alone for a second. The comparison, people will throw up their arms. I don't care what the numbers say. My eyeballs tell me Kobe.
I disagree with that, but go ahead.
Okay, fine. I mean, again, the record of events says differently. Let's look at these last playoffs.
Well, those are stats you picking out. There are others, but go ahead.
Let's look at these last playoffs. When LeBron James, the finals, when he was down 3-1 to a 73-win team, the all-time winningest team, down 3-1, and they, not the Cavs, had home court advantage. And on Sports Nation at the time, I remember turning to the camera and saying, okay, LeBron, Muhammad Ali had to go into Zaire and fight Big George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. He was supposed to be destroyed. He was a 5-1, 6-1 underdog. There's no way he can win that fight. Here's your Rumble in the Jungle. Here is where the legends are made. Here is where legacy is truly made. When you do the impossible. And they did it. And it was because of LeBron James. The season before, he had one of the all-time great finals in a losing effort because Kyrie and Kevin Love were both hurt. They were gone. He tried to do it all himself, took it a competitive 6 games. And then this time, with his crew, down 3-1 to the greatest regular season team that ever was, that had just come back on a Thunder team that was, all-time great, maybe had it not been for the Warriors coming back in them and beating them. LeBron James led them down 3-1. And how did he do it at the very, very end? Remember that? When Draymond Green, who otherwise would have been the finals MVP, LeBron goes up, hard foul. He comes down, hard on his hand. It affects him. He goes to the line with the finals on the line, misses the free throw because of the hand. And you saw him on the free throw line making the mental adjustments. Okay, I got to tweak this. And hitting the shot that iced the finals in one of the all-time great finals appearances. You want to still say he's not clutch? He's absolutely top 5. The greatest player of all time is Michael Jordan. That might not ever change. It's hard for me to imagine a greater player than that. You want to argue Bill Russell or Kareem for the number 2 spot, 2-3, that's fine. Then it's LeBron James. He has 3 championships. that he's actually won, including the one I just mentioned, one where he got them there, a Cleveland team that had no business in the finals. He led them there. If you look at the peak of his career, it's as good as anyone but Michael Jordan's, maybe Kareem's, but it's right there, top 3 of all time. And if you look at the total career value, considering he plays both ends of the floor, better than Magic and Bird because he's a better defender. He's bigger, stronger, faster, etc. Defenses are more sophisticated now. And you look at the length of his prime, the fact that he's still going, the fact that he probably should be like an 8-time MVP. There is no way to keep LeBron James out of the top 5 of all time.
Stephen A., real quick, before you jump on him, can you just clarify one thing for me?
There's nothing. I mean, I need a lot clarified because he said so much. I mean, I thought I was taking a class at MIT with all of these damn analytics people. That is not the same as watching the game. And watching the game is entirely different.
I took you through the Draymond play.
I still am shocked that Max Kellerman uses his numbers more than his eyes. With those Beetlejuice eyes, I do not understand why this man does not exercise.
I have a question. I have a question. How can you see the size of my eyes from your deluxe apartment in the sky?
It is a nice apartment, isn't it? But here's the deal. Go ahead.
I just need you to say one thing. You have D. Wade above LeBron. Why?
No, I did not say that.
Okay, that's why I wanted you to clarify it.
I clarified it the first time. I said the last 2 minutes. I said crunch time, last 2 minutes. If I had to give the ball to one person or the other, I'm going to give it to D. Wade in crunch time. And I make no apologies for that. A 3-time champion, one of the most clutch players in history, D. Wade. In the last 2 minutes? Are you kidding me? The reputation speaks for itself.
Here's the problem,
wait a minute. Hold on. No. I'll let you talk. I got to get in here because you threw out all those numbers. You threw out all those numbers. Let me tell you something right now. First of all, let's remember the fact that the Western Conference, for the vast majority of LeBron James' career, okay, has been the tougher conference with far more stiffer competition. He's been very, very comfortable in the Eastern Conference.
Agreed.
Let's not ignore that, the level of competition that you go up against. Hell, I'd look good too if half my games were against Detroit and Atlanta and Orlando back in the day and all of these other people, and the only stiff competition I had was the occasional contest against the Pacers or the Knicks or the Boston Celtics or somebody. I mean, give me a break. So
you keep running into the Showtime Lakers. It's not easy for you. I get it.
Wait a minute. It's not just the Showtime Lakers. It was the Spurs. It was other teams within the Western Conference as well. We also got a guy in Kobe Bryant that's been all defensive team more so than LeBron that has 5 rings, not 3. And then also you have acrimony and beyond because of different coaches, not to mention the fact that this is a guy that had to ultimately do it without Shaq, even though that was of his doing. We've got that to take into consideration. All I'm saying is you're absolutely right. Nothing to discuss if you're talking about the first 46 minutes. But
here's the problem.
Tell me that one performance in the finals ultimately makes LeBron
he has a lot of clutch performances.
To the point where
LeBron has had a lot of clutch performances.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
He's also had a lot of failures.
Well, okay.
He's also had a lot of failures.
Okay. I want to get to that. Wait a minute. I want to get to that.
Come on now.
I want to get to that.
Come on.
This is the problem with LeBron. The early impression he made was that he wasn't clutch. And by the way, he deserved that, particularly for the finals.
It wasn't early. It extended beyond early.
Fine, particularly for the finals that he had against Dallas. However, to ignore the fact that he's transformed himself into a great clutch player.
I'm not ignoring it.
Well, okay, but that's what he is now. So if you want to take the peak of his career, where he's better than a lot of the guys you just mentioned, yes, including Kobe in his prime, the peak of LeBron, and if you want to take that peak, well, guess what? He is a clutch player now. And if you want to say, I want to average in the career, his career value is amazing too.
But I'm trying to get to your point because it's a point
that I don't want to let you ignore.
I don't want to let you ignore. Listen to me. I'm not playing. Listen, because I'm trying to get to your point. Here's the deal. You want to take into account what he did in what he's doing now.
Yes.
And basically, by and large, ignore those prime years. I, on the other hand, am taking into account what guys did in their primes and somewhat ignoring attrition and father time, diminishing what they did. Which is more valuable in terms of judgment? Am I judging you by what you do when it counts, when you're young, when you're vibrant, when you're in your prime, or when you're old and father time got the best of you? Which way are you doing it?
I got a better way of doing it. You're drafting a team and you're drafting players, and the point is this. win as many championships as you can with this player. LeBron is being drafted in the top 5. You are drafting Michael Jordan, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then LeBron James.
Oh,
he is top 5
I'm not offended
now.
by that. I'm not offended by that. I do understand, because what you're doing is taking into account the totality of his game and how he'll impact other guys. I get that, but that's a different discussion, because, again, that's what lends me towards saying he's easily top 5 because of those first 46 minutes and what he does for everybody. I specifically said where he diminishes in my eyes are those last 2 minutes where it ain't about those other guys.
But he's become excellent at that.
It's about you.
But he's become excellent at it.
Wait a minute. Listen, I saw Kyrie close. I appreciate the block from LeBron James.
You act like LeBron wasn't closing in these finals?
No. Listen, LeBron showed up. LeBron was a superstar. He was the MVP. We get all of that. But I specifically said he got the MVP because of his overall performance. The last 2 minutes.
Okay, let me ask you this.
I'm giving it to Kobe. I'm giving it to MJ. I'm giving it to Bird. Am I giving it to LeBron?
Here's the problem.
Am I giving
if
it
you
to
reduce this, if you reduce this argument to a last couple of plays hero ball argument, then you will prefer the type of player who wants to play that kind of game.
That's not true.
Like Kobe Bryant. That doesn't mean. Wait, let me finish. That doesn't mean that Kobe elevates your chance to win in that situation over LeBron. It means he elevates the odds that he will be the one who scores the winning basket. Doesn't necessarily mean his team is more likely to win than LeBron's, and that's because of LeBron's presence.
Allow me to be arrogant enough to say, let me break down this basketball fact to you. In the end, all those things you say are obvious components to the game of basketball and judging the overall value of a player. But what separates the truly, truly special ones, all of these dudes are going into the Hall of Fame. But what separates the dudes in that different room from the regular dudes is not just titles. It's dudes that were given the ball when it counted, and they said, look, everything else has fallen apart. I need you to take me to the promised land in these
Who's better,
last
LeBron
couple
or Bird?
of minutes.
Who you taking,
Can
LeBron
you
or
do
Bird?
it?
Who you taking,
in
LeBron?
the last 2 minutes?
No, who you
in the
taking,
last 2
period?
minutes?
Who you taking, period?
No, I told you that. I don't do that. I don't do that.
We're choosing up teams. I got LeBron. You got Bird?
I'm taking LeBron
Bird's bad,
for the first 46 minutes. I want Bird for the last 2.
You can't do it like that. You got to choose one or the other.
Excuse me, I'm the one with the basketball credentials on the show, not y'all.
Therefore, you get to make a team and then sub out LeBron for Bird?
I can do that. I can do that.
Don't answer the question. You're not making the rules.
You got to choose one.
Now, that is a debate.
I can do that.
I feel like I'm in the barbershop. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Unfortunately, we have to move on, though.
So proud of the Dallas Cowboys right now. These boys are on their way to try and accomplish one of these three things that you see behind me right now. So I wish them the best of luck. Much love for Dak, much love for Zeke, and definitely much love for my Dallas Cowboys. Good luck, guys. Stay healthy, and go get your ring.
See those Lombardis. That was Cowboys Hall of Famer and 3-time Super Bowl champion Emmitt Smith telling Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, go get yourselves a ring. Stephen A., should Emmitt's comments mean anything to Cowboys Nation?
Well, I suppose it should. I mean, my Lord, I didn't know Moses had shown up. Did you see him? I mean, Moses has shown up. Behold his mighty hand. And he parted the Red Sea. And now, all of a sudden, the Dallas Cowboys have been anointed, prophesized to be ultimately Super Bowl champions. Definitely, you got to take Emmitt Smith seriously. Despite my disgust with the Dallas Cowboys fan base, the most disgusting fan base in American history, the most nauseating, obnoxious fan base in American history, who no one should root for. The only thing you should root for when it comes to them is their absolute misery. I'm talking about the fans. We have to give love and respect to the great Emmitt Smith, the leading rusher in NFL history, who I love dearly. The bottom line is this. Emmitt Smith knows what he's talking about. They're obviously a team to take seriously, and I think the reason why you don't ignore his words, even though he looked like Moses, you don't ignore his words. You don't ignore it because Emmitt Smith has not been one to come out and speak this way about the Cowboys. He didn't speak about them this way when they went to 12-4 a couple of years ago. and lost that playoff game at Lambeau Field. He didn't speak about them in that fashion en route to that playoff appearance. He didn't root for them years ago when they went 13-3 before losing that divisional playoff game to the New York Giants. He didn't do that. He clearly sees something special in this team, and you have to take his words seriously because he's not going to be gung-ho about just throwing out such praise. There's a level of legitimacy that gets attached to it when it comes to Emmitt Smith. I believe him. I respect the hell out of him. He has the right to say it. He has the cachet to say it. I just hope and pray beyond measure that he is absolutely, positively wrong, because even though he's a good person, a good man, and a very, very valid Cowboys fan, he is not the disgusting, obnoxious, delusional, pain in the you-know-what typical Cowboy fan that has sifted through our society like a damn virus. He's not one of those Cowboy fans.
I am glad that Emmitt Smith seems to have taken to Quakerism. I think there's a lot of value there, but it does look like something's going on there.
You guys are unbelievable.
Oh, lots of good things to say about the Quakers. The Underground Railroad, I'm very, and other. I'm very happy about that.
When we want a history lesson, we'll let you know Quakers. Only you would bring up the damn Quakers.
That's what it looked like.
Go ahead, man. Unbelievable.
I'm very glad that Emmitt Smith.
Are next.
I'm very glad that Emmitt Smith thinks that the Cowboys can win a Super Bowl. What's next? Does Cal Ripken think that the Baltimore Orioles can compete? Does Bill Russell like this Celtics team? I mean, of course Emmitt Smith. Look, he sees two young studs at quarterback and running back. He's a running back. This is the first guy that's been on this team who you think could be in the Hall of Fame one day. Since Emmitt Smith, he's running behind a great offensive line, just as Emmitt Smith did, because they also have a young quarterback. I mean, two rookies. It's too good to be true for Cowboys fans. Emmitt Smith is excited and thinks they can win a championship. What am I supposed to take from this exactly, Stephen A? That because he hasn't, we can't remember a quote where he said this in recent years, that this is somehow different? Well, yeah, of course it's different. We just talked about it. The Cowboys are the best team in the NFC, almost wire to wire so far this season. The only losses, two of them to the Giants. Otherwise, they've beaten everybody, and they're really good. Yeah, Emmitt Smith thinks they're good. What's the story here again?
Well, the story here again is that there's a level of credibility that comes attached to it, and more importantly than that, he's not one to say that. If he was the typical guy always ballyhooing about the Cowboys, and there had been times where they gave you indications that they could make a run and you heard his voice, that would be different. What stands out to me in this particular situation is that he seems to be emboldened by what he is seeing, and he's somebody that hasn't been, gung-ho about doing so. Remember, Max, that his initial departure from the Cowboys wasn't ceremonious. He wasn't treated with the deference and respect that he deserves, and I'm glad you brought this up because this is very, very important. I remember years ago, the Dallas Cowboys had won a championship. They won their first Super Bowl with Jimmy Johnson. Their second time around, Emmitt Smith was a holdout. He missed those two games. They had ultimately reached an agreement, and Emmitt and I have personally talked about this. I have never seen a person who just signed a contract extension look more furious than he had looked, because it took the Dallas Cowboys starting 0-2 after they had won the Super Bowl the previous year for Jerry Jones to come to his senses. He didn't hold out with Troy Aikman. He didn't hold out with other dudes, but he held out with Emmitt Smith, and Emmitt Smith was highly offended by that. When Emmitt Smith ultimately departed later on in his career and he went to Arizona, he didn't feel he was treated right. So there's always been, there's respect, but the level of love and adulation that you're seeing from Jerry Jones as it pertains to Tony Romo, that wasn't there for Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith is a prideful man. So he's somebody that remembers that, recalls it, holds on to it, and is very, very reluctant to give undue praise to the Cowboys. But he's willing to do it here, which tells you how legitimate he thinks they are. That's why you should respect it.
All right, we will leave it there. Coming up, Max sees a problem with the NFL. But don't worry, everybody. He's got the solution. Don't miss Max's Final Take coming up in just a bit.
College football lives here. After winning the Big Ten title, Penn State believe they earned a trip to the playoffs.
This is one of the better stories of college football.
Now they take their 9-game winning streak to Pasadena to face USC, winners of 8 straight.
Slash back at the 5, touchdown, Trojans.
The Rose Bowl game presented by Northwestern Mutual. Coverage begins January 2nd at 5 Eastern on ESPN and on ESPN Radio.
Meanwhile, earlier this week, we finally saw video of Oklahoma running back Joe Mixon punching a woman in 2014. We warn you, this video is disturbing. Now we have video of Mixon after the incident, telling police that it felt like a dude hit me when Amelia Molitor slapped him and that he punched her as a reaction. Here's Mixon explaining his version of the events leading up to the assault.
We had no problem with her. She was just being disrespectful, you know, coming smoking in my face and getting at them crazy. So after that, the gay dude, he was just like, he called me something. He was like, so then I was like, what? I was like, you got me messed up. And then I called him a and after that, the girl, she dropped her purse. That's when she came in my face, pushed me, and then my glasses came off, and then like I had like jumped at her like to watch out, and I was like, watch out. And then she came in my face. I put my head down, and she swung on me. And after that, like, I was so shocked because she hit me so hard. It felt like a dude hit me. And, like, after that, like, when my face hit, it was like, boom. And, like, my reaction was just right there.
So to be clear, Mixon told police that he heard a racial slur from Molitor's male friend, but not from Molitor herself. And Mixon admitted that he responded with an anti-gay slur at the male friend. Stephen A., does this latest video change anything for you and your stance?
Yes, it does. It changes it because I think it makes him look worse, not better. So let me get this straight. A man, you bring up the issue of a racial slur, which has absolutely nothing to do with you hitting the woman. But the racial slur came from a dude, but you hit the girl. Mm-hmm. What sense does that make? I mean, you sound like a flaming idiot. I mean, it doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. It makes him look worse as far as I'm concerned. There's no excuse for it. And by the way, yes, she hit him first. Yes, she had no business hitting him. And that's a different subject to discuss because men don't need to go around and get hit either. But it doesn't negate the fact that you're 6 feet, 226 pounds. You're clearly the male in this equation. And by the way, if you have the wherewithal to strike her, why couldn't you have the wherewithal to grab her and prevent her from hitting you? Why couldn't you do that? Or to make sure that she doesn't get in your face? You could have grabbed her to refrain her from hitting you without hitting her. You chose not to do that. And then to sit down and to talk, you're basically trying to justify your idiocy and your belligerent behavior. And there's simply no excuse for it. As far as I'm concerned, it made him look worse. The video of him hitting the girl was bad enough. But now that we've heard his explanation, he didn't just look criminal, but he sounded like an idiot. And I think this is the kind of thing that's going to come back to haunt him when it comes to him getting drafted by somebody. I really do.
Yeah, I look at this and see that he knows he's been caught red-handed. It's on video. So it sounds like, and I have no way of knowing whether or not he's telling the truth, but whether he is or he isn't, it sounds like someone who is looking for the things that would somehow come closest to justifying his behavior. Not that it does, because he knows he's busted. So one of them is the third rail of American life, that specific racial slur, because that's the strongest word in the English language, really, and the most reviled and the one closest to an actual physical attack. And so he says that he heard that word. You're right, the source wasn't her, but still he says that one of the sources of the conflict was apparently this other guy. So he says he hears that. And then secondly, he has to say that his reaction wasn't as disproportionate as it looks on video. So he says, look, you can see she hit me and it felt like I was hit by a dude. In other words, she hit me hard. But when he says by a dude, what he's saying is, so just instinctively, I swung back as though that was the stimulus, as though the stimulus was something that it wasn't. So I wasn't, in my right mind when I did it. So whether or not he's telling the truth as to his perception of the events, it sounds bad because it sounds like someone who's had time to prepare to give the only possible explanation he can come up with that comes closest to justifying his behavior. Sounds like I know I'm busted, and I'm trying my best to get as off the hook as possible.
Listen, he sounded like an idiot. I'm going to go back to that. It's very, very simple to me. A racial slur came from a man, but you hit the girl? Okay? That's I don't even know why he brought that up when he was talking about the incident. And then on top of it all, again, you skirted out of there because you knew, like you said, he got busted. You knew that you were wrong. Not to mention the fact that, again, listen, I want to be very, very clear because I had my radio show yesterday, and Merrill Hodge and other NFL aficionados that I had spoken to all said at least half the league is not going to touch this guy. They're not going to want any part because the second you draft him, the first thing they're going to show is the video of him hitting the girl. And they're not going to want that and try to support that to their patrons and their constituency. They're not going to want any part of it, so they're not going to touch him. But the other side to that is this. You also have folks call, and I had so many callers on my radio show yesterday talking about, yeah, but she hit him first. Not an excuse, Stephen A., but she hit him first. Okay, let's make sure we get that out the way. Nobody needs to be hitting anybody. Men don't need to be hitting women. Women don't need to be hitting men. Yep. Let's get that out the way. But having said all of that, you are a man. You are over 225 pounds. You couldn't grab her to prevent her from hitting you? You couldn't do that? You couldn't do that?
I want to bring up one more thing about this.
You could have done that.
Yeah, I want to bring up one more thing about this because there has been things written and said about the idea that when you read or hear that someone had to have their jaw wired shut, you shouldn't need to see the video. And you and I discussed yesterday, Stephen A., about this is the way, evolution has fixed our brains, that when we hear about things, it seems abstract to us. We hear about statistics and numbers coming from parts of the world torn by revolution and other disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes. You hear this stuff, disasters and people suffering. When it's in numbers, when it's statistics, you react one way to it and you think that's a very bad thing. When you see it, we're wired for this. When you see that visual, it affects us differently. So I would just say that try to keep in mind this video. This is what it looks like when you read she had to have her jaw wired shut. That's what it looks like. That's the reason she had to have her jaw wired shut. That's what it looks like.
I appreciate you saying that. Stephen, can I add one thing more context to this story?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One other thing, you mentioned that she pushed him first, and that's never okay. Nobody should be putting hands on anyone, male or female. Racial slurs are not okay, just as saying anti-gay slurs, those are also not okay. But in terms of her side of the story from Molitor, she was outside with her friends, and Joe Mixon and a couple of his other teammates started taunting and harassing one of her friends for being gay initially. So they go into this sandwich shop to kind of get away from it. And then she's kind of explaining what's going on. He follows her in. They start to get into it. Well, the point that I want to make here is this never had to happen. He could have left the whole thing alone and not instigated it initially. And I know you mentioned, obviously, grabbing her rather than to calm her down, rather than, hitting her back, which is never okay. But it doesn't even need to be that. You need to be smarter than that and not be touching her, period, and just walking away from this situation, a situation that you started yourself.
Well, first of all, you're assuming I knew that part, and I did not know that. I did not know.
No, that's why I wanted to share the context.
Yeah. He was harassing her outside and then followed her in the store. I was not aware of that portion of the story.
Yeah.
Her friends. I'm just saying, I just wasn't aware of any of that. My only point, the only thing I know about is the video that I saw, the two videos that I saw. And I was commenting about that. That's number one. Number two, again, when I sit there and talk about somebody grabbing, I'm not encouraging anybody to be grabbing somebody and putting their hands on anybody. I'm simply making the point that if you are going to react, you could react by restraining someone from inflicting violence upon you rather than having the penchant to inflict violence upon somebody else. That should be your default position, not trying to inflict violence upon somebody else of a different gender who, by the way, she's a woman, you're a man. She clearly is outweighed by, I would assume, by about 50 pounds. You are a man. You have no business punching a woman in the face. You do not do that under any circumstance. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, he was suspended for a year, and we'll see if he pays more through the draft process again, because having the visual, we mentioned Tyreek Hill in his incident, they didn't have the video, and he seemed to be just fine now playing with the Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll see if this makes a difference.
And by the way, Molly,
yes.
One other important point. I hope Joe Mixon, those boys, Max, that he was hanging with, where are they right now? He's the one in the news, all right, because of his belligerent and criminal act, to be quite honest with you. But then your boys that were with you. You see, I cover a league in which I see a lot of guys with their boys around who would step in and never allow something to elevate and escalate to that point. Where are they right now?
That's
While he's in the news, they're nowhere to be found. I hope this is a lesson for Joe Mixon. Be careful about the company you keep, because maybe if they weren't instigating stuff with you and instead they stepped in and tried to de-escalate the situation, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about him and how his future may end up being compromised.
Yep, I hope a lot of people, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in this mess. It is a huge game tonight. You just heard it. Kentucky has won 8 of their 9 matchups since John Calipari started coaching the Wildcats. But Rick Pitino's Cardinals have the more recent national championship, winning it all in 2013. Stephen A., how much has Calipari hurt Pitino's career over the years?
Well, let me say this. The record would not indicate that. Rick Pitino is a national champion, won a national champion in Louisville 4 years ago. He's been to like 3 Final Fours in the last 5 or 6 years or so. So from a production standpoint, no. But when you think about college basketball, Max, and the sizzle that used to come with it, now, no doubt the NBA's ridiculous, one and done rule, 19 years old, 1 year in college, and then you could go to pros. That sort of hurt the college game. There's no doubt about that. But when I think about Calipari and these All-Americans, one after another, Louisville's right up the road, and they all keep going to Kentucky. I mean, you got Malik Monk dropping 47 the other day. You got Isaiah Briscoe there. You had John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins and the crew. I mean, you just look at these crew, Karl Anthony Towns and the Harrison twins and everybody else. I mean, everywhere you turn, all these guys go to Kentucky. Ain't nobody going to Louisville. Louisville's winning. Rick Pitino's a hell of a coach, but the All-Americans, the sizzle, clearly is at Kentucky and Duke more so than anybody else, and I just don't understand it.
Stephen A.,
I really don't.
I have a hot take for you. You ready? Get your oven mitts ready. John Calipari has helped Rick Pitino because Calipari, he prefers it that way.
Calipari.
Has essentially invented modern college basketball. He was the one who saw the way it was going and went with it. So he's not considered like a blue blood coach like Izzo or Roy Williams or someone like that, but he is probably the key historical figure of this college basketball era. He's the guy who invented it, basically, and showed everyone else how to do it.
So how does that help Pitino?
Including Rick Pitino, because Pitino is a coach in this era.
How has it helped Pitino?
He's been largely imitated by successful coaches, Stephen A., including Rick Pitino.
Once upon a time in the sport of college basketball, when Calipari, he was at UMass, and then he came to the NBA, and then he went to Memphis and all of this other stuff. But Pitino was arguably the man. Yeah, there was Dean Smith and then Coach K, and then Roy Williams was at Kansas before he went to UNC.
Right.
And Jim Calhoun, yes, you can't forget him, the great Jim Calhoun. But the fact of the matter is Pitino was like, it flew off the tongue when you thought about college basketball. He was synonymous with
Calipari
it. Now
was
you think about his Calipari and Coach K.
And Calipari was considered the imitator mainly because his last name also ended in a vowel and he's from the Northeast, basically, so they reminded people of Pitino. But in fact, it's Calipari who's been the innovator and basically invented this modern era of one-and-done guys.
All I'm just talking about is sizzle. We know that Bill Self, Rick Pitino, all of these guys are great and they produce. I'm just saying in terms of name recognition, cachet, and in terms of brands that carry the sport of college basketball, you don't really think much about Rick Pitino these days.
Right.
And I think it's because of Calipari.
Yeah, he surpassed him. I'm
It's
looking
right up the
forward
road.
to these two going head-to-head, of course, tonight. Let's stay with college hoops for a moment, gentlemen. Iowa head coach Fran McCaffrey not too pleased at the end of their game against North Dakota. After North Dakota's Corey Baldwin stole the ball away as the clock was winding down, McCaffrey was so annoyed, he told his team get off the court without shaking hands with their opponents this morning. McCaffrey told our Jeff Goodman that he regrets his no handshake decision and texted the North Dakota coach to apologize. So obviously, heat of the moment there. Max, what's your reaction to that?
I think the lesson is even the bad boy Pistons eventually, who have no regrets about anything, eventually regretted not shaking hands with the Bulls when the Bulls swept them and really beat them up in that series. The moral of the story, boys and girls, is when the game is over, you shake hands.
That's obvious. I would say this. Here's the bigger point. These are college kids. You're a grown man, probably married, probably have children. You are a leader of young men. You have to set an example. His frustration may have been warranted, but you have to conduct yourself as an adult, even more so when you're leading kids and young men into manhood. He did not do that. He dropped the ball in a written statement. It's not enough. He should be on camera apologizing. That's all that's required, but he should at least do that because it was a juvenile thing for him to do as the coach, not to shake hands with an opponent.
No question. Caught up in the heat of the moment, needs to set a precedent, but clearly he's regretful there.
You are so disrespectful.
He is going to fall off a cliff.
Shut the hell up.
That's not even close to my best.
They're wrong. And I don't give a damn that they agree with me or not.
Richard Sherman called Thursday Night Football a poop fest. But to the fan, it's really more like Brussels sprout ice cream. It's ice cream, so you want it and consume it. But it tastes bad, and when you're done, you think, next time I'm skipping that. And then next Thursday comes, and it's ice cream again. And this time it's sardine flavored, which you haven't tried, so you do it, and so on, from Labor Day to Christmas. And at a certain point, not even you buy the old, honey, it's the Jags against the Niners on short rest. I have to watch excuse. Sad. Fans, players, media moguls, lend me your ears. I come to fix Thursday Night Football, not to bury it. Here is my simple three-point plan. Warning, there is some two-digit arithmetic. 1, Thursday Night Football must work for the teams. No more poop fests. So only those coming off a bye week will play in a Thursday night game. Proper rest and recovery time for the players, enough prep time for the coaches, and travel's a breeze. Good with you, Richard Sherman? Okay. 2, we must avoid bad games on Thursday nights. The solution? Each 4-division team has its bye weeks at the same time. 1 week it's the NFC East. Everybody take the day. The next week the AFC North gets a break. Simple. And that sets up, wait for it, weekly Thursday night divisional doubleheaders. Thursday night is rivalry night. Imagine tomorrow, it's not just Giants-Eagles, but also Dallas-Washington, and everyone's coming off a bye. Next week, it's Chiefs-Raiders and Broncos-Chargers. Honey, this is legitimately important. You're with me, right? All right. 3, we got to make this work. We're too close to turn back now, so here's the math part. First, every division has 2 bye weeks. Every team has 2 weeks off during the regular season and plays 2 Thursday night games coming off those byes. That accounts for 16 weeks of Thursday night football divisional doubleheaders. So that's the first thing. Second, everybody plays the first week of the season and the last week of the season. The 16 bye weeks, 8 divisions times 2 bye weeks each, start week 2 and runs through the second to last weekend. Okay? That means that Thursday's rivalry night begin week 3, runs for 16 straight weeks, and ends through the end of the regular season. Okay, so you're thinking now, Max, you need an 18-week season to make that work. The first 2 weeks have no Thursday game, and then 16 weeks of TNF means, yes, correct. So that everyone plays on kickoff weekend and nobody plays Thursdays on short rest, TNF starts the 3rd week. The regular season does expand from 17 weeks of meaningful football to 18 weeks. You can borrow the week from the end of the preseason or add a week in January. Who cares where you get it from? Still 16 games per team, but 18 weeks of action. So to review, divisions take bye weeks together. Bye weeks are followed by Thursday night divisional doubleheaders. Each division has 2 bye weeks and 2 Thursday nights. Season runs 18 weeks. Thursday solved for everyone. And I got a plan to fix Tuesdays and Wednesdays, too. Got nothing to do with football. I'm not kidding. Happy holidays.
Oh boy, bravo, Max Kellerman, Max for president. And for more on Max's Final Take, make sure to head over to our Twitter and Facebook pages. All the Final Takes live there. Check them out. And it's a new year and a new move for First Take. We are moving to ESPN on January 3rd from 2 to 1. Wale will join us for a special live appearance. Ice Cube will be in the house, Jim Kelly, and more. Have a great hump day, people. We'll see you all tomorrow. More First Take. Thanks so much for listening to the pod. Catch First Take weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN2. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Penn State has won 9 straight, the Big Ten title, and are ranked 5th in the nation. USC awaits winners of 8 in a row. The Rose Bowl game presented by Northwestern Mutual, January 2nd at 5 Eastern on ESPN Radio.